Let's talk about something that every single one of us wrestles with, no matter what we believe. It's probably the toughest question out there, the question of suffering.
And this is the heart of it, isn't it? If God is all good and all-powerful, then why is the world filled with so much hurt? It's a question that can challenge the deepest faith and fuel the strongest skepticism. It really gets to the core of everything.
Now, to really get a handle on this, philosophers have a term for the kind of suffering that really bothers us. They call it gratuitous evil. But let's just break that down. This isn't a scraped knee or a bad day. This is the kind of deep, pointless-seeming pain that makes you ask, what good could possibly come from this?
So, how do we even begin to approach a question that big? Well, the first perspective we're going to explore asks a question of its own. Are we sure we're seeing the whole picture?
This leads us to an idea called skeptical theism. It sounds complex, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, our human minds are too limited. We're like someone looking at a single confusing thread of a giant tapestry. From our perspective, it might look like a mess, but we can't see the full design. And this analogy just makes it all click. Think about a little kid at the doctor's office. When they get a shot, all they know is that someone they trust is causing them sudden, sharp pain. It feels cruel, pointless, totally gratuitous. But the parent, with their much bigger perspective, knows that this small, temporary pain is absolutely necessary for the much greater good of a long, healthy life.
All right, so if we accept that our view might be limited, what could be happening beyond what we can see? This takes us to our next section, which explores the idea that suffering might not just be something to endure, but something that could actually have a purpose.
This is a pretty startling thought, right? That suffering can act like a parent for adults. The idea here is that when life is comfortable and easy, we tend to rely on our own strength, our own plans, our own resources. But hardship has a way of stripping all of that away, and it's in those moments we're forced to look for a strength that's not our own.
And you see this play out in some incredible stories. Take Joseph. His own brothers betray him, sell him into slavery, and then he's falsely accused and thrown in prison. From his perspective, sitting in that dark cell, his life looked like a series of pointless tragedies. But every single one of those terrible steps was actually positioning him to one day save an entire nation from famine. Then there's the story of Job, a man who loses literally everything, his family, his wealth, his health, and his story is basically one long, raw argument with God about why this is happening. But here's the amazing part. He never gets a neat, tidy answer. Instead, in the middle of his pain, he encounters God in a way he never could have in his comfort. The suffering itself became the pathway.
And just look at the Apostle Paul. The man was beaten, shipwrecked, and thrown in prison over and over again. And yet, it was from a prison cell that he wrote the letters that would go on to shape Western civilization. His physical chains, his limitations, actually became the platform for his greatest legacy.
Now, this is all well and good to talk about in hindsight, but what about when we are in the middle of it? When we're crying out for help, praying for relief, and all we get back is silence? That feeling can be the hardest part of all.
So this next idea suggests a pretty radical shift in perspective. What if what feels like silence isn't actually silence at all? What if it's an answer, just not the one we wanted? No is an answer, and wait is also an answer. Sometimes the real struggle is accepting an answer that isn't an immediate yes.
The story of Lazarus is the perfect case study for this. His sisters send an urgent message to Jesus. The one you love is sick. Come quickly. But Jesus intentionally waits 2 more days. From their perspective, his delay felt like indifference. It felt like he didn't care enough, and because of it, their brother died. But Jesus was operating on a different timeline with a much bigger purpose in mind.
And this was the purpose. By waiting until Lazarus was already dead, Jesus wasn't just able to show his power to heal a sickness. He was able to show his power over death itself. He gave them something far greater than what they had asked for, proof that he was, in fact, the resurrection and the life.
Okay, this brings us to our final point. And honestly, it's a huge paradox, an idea that seems to turn our whole understanding of strength and weakness completely on its head.
So let's go back to Paul. He talks about this mysterious thorn in the flesh. We don't know exactly what it was, some kind of chronic, agonizing physical or emotional pain. And he did what any of us would do. He begged God 3 times, please just take this away from me.
And the answer he gets is absolutely crucial. God doesn't say yes. He says no. But he gives a reason. He says, my grace is sufficient for you. for my power is made perfect in weakness. In other words, God wasn't going to remove the problem. He was promising his presence in the problem. The very place of weakness was where his strength would show up the most.
And you can see how this completely flips Paul's whole perspective. He goes from begging God to take the weakness away to actually boasting about it. Why would he do that? Because he finally understood his weakness wasn't an obstacle to God's power, it was the very thing that made room for it. For when I am weak, he says, then I am strong.
And really, this journey through Scripture all leads to this incredible promise. It's a statement of profound trust that God is at work weaving all things, not just the good things, but the painful, confusing things too, together for an ultimate good for those who love him. It's a promise that no pain is ever truly wasted in his bigger story.
So we end with a new question. We start by asking, why is this happening? But maybe the more hopeful question is, what could God be doing through this? It invites us to look for purpose not in the absence of pain, but right in the middle of it, wondering where a greater story might just be waiting to unfold.